Even with the divisive opinions on Star Trek Discovery Season 1, there was a character generally liked by just about everyone. Okay, aside from her. One not played by Michelle Yeoh. Okay, come on, Lorca. I'm talking about Lorca. Jeez, he's in the thumbnail. You knew where I was going with this. Editor Wingrace here. Have you ever recorded an entire video and then realized you hit the A key and changed the Discovery logo to Lower Decks? Me neither. Anyways, unrelated note, please enjoy this Lower Decks logo for my entire video. With that being the case, it's almost really surprising that he hasn't made any reappearances in the show over the past few seasons. With the 5th and final season shortly upon us, it definitely seems like this may be his last chance outside of a rumored appearance on Strange New Worlds in order for him to return to the franchise. But what if I were to tell you that he's not only definitely returning this season, but he's already been all over the trailers and the marketing and everything?
It could be very dangerous in the wrong hands.
Before we get to that, I suppose a little bit of backstory is in order. You see, the Lorca from Season 1 turned out to be nothing but a mirror universe duplicate.
What? No!
This version is no longer in possession of his immortal coil. Shocking, I know. Who I'm actually trying to refer to here is the Prime version of Lorca, the regular Lorca, I suppose, if you will. Sure, it was definitely stated in the show that he was presumed dead, he had no way of surviving, he plunged into a sun, something like that, but it was never actually definitively confirmed on the screen. We never saw a body, any of that stuff. All those tropes, there is next to a 0% chance that any of that is actually true until we see it on screen. So using my immense powers of just making random connections and overanalyzing just about the most pointless material available, I have come to the conclusion that not only is Lorca back in this season, but he is one of the primary new characters in this season that we've seen in all of the marketing up to this point. That is the character of Laak. How is that possible, you may be asking? That is, if you didn't already click off this video because you don't give a crap about Discovery, this show's set 1,000 years in one universe away from Lorca's last known whereabouts. Here's where things really hits the weeds and where I really put some things into overdrive. Based purely on trailer footage and some interview information, I've cobbled together a couple of theories as to how all of this is plausible. First up, we have the trailer footage of what appears to be a Mirror Universe Constitution-class vessel. Following prior Star Trek lore, we do know that a Connie-class ship known as the Defiant, and not the one you're probably thinking of, was lost to our realm in the TOS episode The Tholian Web.
It's gone.
Only to be rediscovered half a century later in our time, but a full century earlier in universe time, in the Mirror Universe episodes of Star Trek Enterprise. Here was where we learned that the cross through that interphasic space left the crew mad and dead, and then the ship went on to solidify the power of the Terran Empire for at least the next century or so. We don't know in Alpha Canon what happened to that ship over the intervening years, so let's just say that the ISS Constitution-class ship that we see in this trailer is this very same ship. Then it's plausible that Lorca somehow acquired it in the Mirrorverse and just hopped his way back over to the Prime One. Assuming that it attempted travel in the same manner as Tholian Web, we know this causes substantial issues, but it can cross both reality and time. So this could explain those discrepancies, as well as provide a plausible reason as to why Lorca no longer looks as his dashing human self. Now let's move to option 2. Fairly similar in concept to the crossing on the Defiant, but this time he came back on the ISS Discovery. Again, as stated in Discovery itself, this ship was destroyed by Klingons, at least presumably so after crossing back into the Prime Line. It's not seen on screen. That's not necessarily a definitive answer because we didn't see it. The creatives of this show have pretty much confirmed they intend to address and resolve the Calypso short trek in this season, so weaving him into that story definitely feels like it could be part of the answer. We know from that short trek that Discovery had been hiding in a nebula for almost 1,000 years.
How long you been out here, alone, waiting for the crew to return from wherever they went?
Almost 1,000 years.
So, you know, pretty much the amount of time that the regular Discovery jumped between seasons 2 and 3. Calypso Zora also mentioned that she had been asked to remain by her captain, but they never explicitly state who her captain is by name or even the gender, so potentially this could be Lorca. Now, no matter how they decide to explain Calypso Disco, there's definitely going to be some pretty hoop-jumpy answers. Calypso Disco can't be Prime Disco, since that's already been upgraded to the detachable Nacelle A variant. If this is the Mirror Universe version, it would help explain things. Now, Calypso Disco never mentioned it had a spore drive, so that checks out, and the livery outside the ship could easily have been repainted to match our universe in much the same way that regular Discovery did in their crossing. You could also assume that the Federation information was in the database from the Prime Defiant, information as to the loss of the Prime Discovery since the Defiant is in a time period after Discovery went to the future, even though that wasn't known at the time. Now, this only works to a point because he wouldn't and shouldn't know that Discovery actually jumped into the future, but this is actually where the writers need to come in and do a little work for themselves, so I'm not going to write them out of every single jam right here. Similarly, it would need to be addressed as to why the Mirror Disco actually had a Zora on board, as well as having a full complement of mostly Starfleet and Federation stuff. Now, there is something mentioned in the actual Calypso short trek where they say there is only one shuttle on board, and it was just picked up before they went into hiding so recently it wasn't even given a name. That could indicate that there was something going on that they could pick up there. So let's just go ahead and assume that all of this stuff happened between the time our Discovery jumped to the Mirror Universe, this one came here, Lorca went out and picked up some supplies before going into hiding. It also wouldn't address the change in appearance to Lorca or the missing other Mirror Universe crew members. I'm going to go ahead and say that they all died in the crossing, and the only reason Lorca survived and changed his appearance is because he was being tortured in the agony booth at the time. This gave him both the messed up appearance and his sole survivor status. How did he survive for so long? I don't know. Alien tech, stasis, an overdose of cross-temporal particles bonded to his genome in a state of quantum entanglement with the Prime Universe Discovery due to interferometric subspace radiation. Who's to say? On to option 3, which really isn't an entry in and of itself, but it could be added to the others. He possibly could have used tech similar to Krall in Star Trek Beyond. Now, I know you guys don't want to bring in that Kelvin universe stuff, but technically all of that stuff should still exist in the Prime timeline, so let's just roll with it. A life energy transference device that was used to extend that guy's life, but also forced him to kind of take on the appearance of whatever aliens he was using for the purpose. This would also fit in nicely with his new name, Laak, which is just basically a bastardized version of the name Lorca. Seriously, say Lorca really fast with a bit of a weird alien accent, maybe some odd teeth in your mouth, and it definitely comes out sounding like Laak. He could have started using the Mirror Universe crew that came over with him, then moved on to something like a Riemann. He also looks vaguely like J.G. Hertzler's Changeling character, Las, which also sounds eerily similar to Laak, so why not one of those? Although, that said, it was also stated in this interview with Trek Culture.
And what my character is what he turns out to be is huge for Star Trek.
Sure, this could definitely be a reference to him being Lorca, but that seems more Discovery contained and less like a vast Star Trek changing event. So let's go ahead and assume this tech that he's been using is Iconian, Preserver, something along those lines. That would also help fit into this grand galactic spanning power shifting archaeology hunt that kind of seems to be the theme of this season. All of this is great and all, but it kind of feels like a cheat, doesn't it? No Jason Isaacs back to actually reprise the role? Personally, I think that's where the final piece of this puzzle falls into place. He will be back. Jason Isaacs will be coming back to reprise that role in the final episode, or maybe even the very end of the penultimate episode leading into the final episode. And why do I think that? Well, in the very same interview with Trek Culture, we get this little nugget.
I had rapped. It's hard to explain, but I'm kind of not in it, but I had rapped.
It seems like this means, or at least can be interpreted to mean, that the Elias version of Laak isn't in the finale, but the character is. And I'm going to go ahead and throw that Hail Mary right now and say that Jason Isaacs' Lorca is in the finale, and that's why Elias wasn't needed to film that role in the 10th episode of this season. I'm extremely aware that all of this is just wild conjecture and theory at this point, But I'm not going to wait around to actually watch the episodes for clues when I can put this out and look like a genius if it all comes true. Tell me all your thoughts down below. Are you excited for this season? Who else do you think we might see returning for this swan song of a season? How do you think Calypso will be explained? Do you think Jonathan Frakes will show his mug on screen so we get another Riker appearance? Like, share, subscribe, do all those fancy YouTube things. But until next time...
Pause, hollow novel. That's enough silly stories for one night. Good night, computer.